The U.S. is expelling a number of Russian diplomats and introducing new sanctions over alleged attempts to influence the presidential election. RT's Caleb Maupin joins us live now from New York. Caleb, could you tell us more about these measures that have just come into effect?
Well, it's an executive order from U.S. President Barack Obama directing the Department of Treasury to put sanctions on 9 entities and 4 individuals. Now, Obama says this is appropriate action in response to Russian cyber-enabled activities. Now, the statement from Obama alleges that the entities listed provided material support to the GRU, that's Russian security services, for their cyber operations. Now, furthermore, in addition to these new sanctions that have been imposed, we have 35 Russian diplomats who've been declared persona non grata in the United States. They're basically being told, you're not welcome here, get out. They have 72 hours to leave the United States. They have to flee the United States very quickly in order to be in compliance with this order from Obama. Now, at the same time that all of this happened, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, as well as the FBI, released a joint report describing what they say are the technical details regarding the tools and infrastructure of Russian hacking. Now, this report, it goes into detail, describes a lot of software and computer technology, but it never explains what proof that they have that all of this stuff is linked to Russia. There's no real proof or evidence that the tools they're describing or the technology they're describing is being used by people associated with Russia or the Russian government. Furthermore, this report from the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI actually contains a disclaimer. It actually says that this report is for informational purposes only, and that the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security do not provide any warranties with the report. So very interesting developments. Now, Obama is set to leave office very soon. He will be leaving the White House, and on January 20th, Donald Trump will be sworn in as the new president of the United States. People are speculating that it's not going to be a very smooth transition, as they clearly have very different assessments of why the U.S. presidential election ended up the way it did.
All right, RT's Caleb Maupin reporting there from New York. We know that you'll stay on top of the story as more information becomes available. Now, the Russian president's spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, has condemned the U.S. sanctions, calling them unlawful. This is what he had to say.
We regret that this decision has been taken by the U.S. administration and by President Obama personally. We are now analyzing the details of the announcement. As we have said previously, we consider these sanctions to be groundless and a violation of international law. We dismiss all of the baseless allegations that have been made against Russia. From our point of view, these sanctions illustrate the unpredictable and aggressive nature of the Obama administration's foreign policy. We think there are 2 goals behind this decision taken by the administration, which is leaving office in 3 weeks. The first is to harm the already strained relationship between Moscow and Washington, and the second is to obstruct the foreign policy plans of the incoming Trump administration. The second of those is an internal issue for the United States, and Americans need to figure out to what extent it is correct and legal. At this stage, I cannot say what retaliation will follow from our side, but clearly the principle of reciprocity must stand. An appropriate response will be made, depending on what President Putin decides.
Right, RT's Murat Gazdiev has more on the reaction from Russian officials to the latest announcement from Washington.
Peskov said that these sanctions are unpredictable, that these sanctions are aggressive, and most of all, that they are baseless. That, still, despite all the rhetoric, everything they've said, they have still not offered any proof that Russia or any Russian was behind this, that the Russian government had any role in any sort of hacking. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, she was curt and more direct.
Today, the U.S. has been humiliated, not by terrorists or enemies, but by its own president. Washington has received a slap from its master, who has doubled the upcoming administration's problems.
Of course, here there are countermeasures that are going to follow. They're going to decide on what they are. And from what I've been hearing it's very likely that they'll be moderate, that they won't want to ruin relations further with the new U.S. president coming in. Nevertheless, the foreign ministry says on Friday we'll know exactly what Russia's going to do about this. Donald Trump is coming in and he's going to inherit a political diplomatic disaster. You can't call it anything but. Donald Trump, who is more moderate on Russia, he, unlike Barack Obama, he isn't outright hostile towards Russia, towards Moscow, towards Vladimir Putin, and he has said he wants to work together. We've apparently heard an advisor to Donald Trump saying that the new president, if he chooses to do so, could quickly dismantle all the sanctions that Barack Obama has put in place. Nevertheless, the president-elect himself has been asked to comment about these latest sanctions, and here's what he said.
I think we ought to get on with our lives. I think that computers have complicated lives very greatly. The whole, age of computer has made it where nobody knows exactly what's going on. We have speed, we have a lot of other things, but I'm not sure you have the kind of security that you need. But I have not spoken with the senators, and I certainly will be over a period of time.
Of course, Donald Trump has his work cut out for him. It's not going to be an easy job repairing ties now that we're pretty much at rock bottom. But there is the opinion that Barack Obama is using his last few weeks in office
to go out with a bang,
to return personal favors. Look at the UN Security Council resolution regarding Israel. Israel is absolutely convinced that that was the work of Barack Obama, who had a very difficult relationship with Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. We know he had a very difficult relationship with Vladimir Putin, and now he's using his last few weeks in office to, somewhat symbolically sanctioning the Russian military intelligence, Russian FSB, the FBI equivalent. I mean, you've got to ask yourself, what's the point?
Now across live to Peter Ford, former British diplomat. Thank you very much, Peter, for being with us here on RT International. Now, these new sanctions follow the release of an official report which details alleged Russian interference. However, it doesn't explain how these two hacking groups described the links to the Russian government. So basically, a lot of fanfare, no specific details or evidence. What do you make of all of this?
What really strikes me is the hypocrisy of the American reaction. It's so childish. It's obvious that it's sour grapes for having lost for Clinton having lost the election. But what's also striking is the hypocrisy. America interferes in elections and referenda around the world every week. Only a few months ago, Obama came to Britain and brazenly, openly interfered in the Brexit referendum, conspiring with David Cameron in a clearly prearranged script. He threatened that Britain, if it voted for Brexit, would go to the back of the queue for any new trade agreement with America. And this was so brazen, so open, that it passed almost unnoticed. And yet the reality was that America was interfering in the British referendum. So to have the chutzpah, the effrontery now to accuse Russia of providing no proof, by the way, is amazing.
So one thing about this document that strikes me interesting is it includes a disclaimer that the Department of Homeland Security doesn't provide any warranties for that information, and the report is for informational purposes only. Why is that, and have you ever heard of something like this?
Well, clearly they don't have anything which is actionable in a court of law, and therefore they're going to be careful with their wording. Frankly, I suspect that many people like me don't care one way or the other whether Russia did what it's accused of having done. If it did so, it did a service to humanity, if you ask me, by exposing Clinton and the dirty business that she was involved in doing down her Democratic rival. This was a public service, but we don't know whether it happened or not, and I think history will judge that it didn't matter. In any case, very soon the page will turn on this lame duck Obama administration.
Are you surprised at the scope of the sanctions?
Certainly not surprised. Obama painted himself into a corner weeks ago by saying that there would have to be a U.S. reaction. The reaction is petulant, childish, and pointless.
All right. Now, despite a lot of mainstream media focus on Russia and its alleged hacking, Barack Obama's security advisor says more attention should have been given to the scandal. Let's take a listen to what Susan Rice had to say about this instance.
The fact that they did not focus on this issue to the extent that we thought they would and they should is something that I think the press needs to do some introspection about.
Do you share this assessment from Susan Rice that the media basically didn't pay as much attention as they could have?
The media gave altogether too much attention to this whole Russophobia thing. The American media take their lead from the administration and have gone overboard on Russophobia. I don't think we can say that not enough attention was paid to the issue, but attention was paid to trivia and missing the big picture of the hanky-panky that was going on inside the Democratic Party and the substance of relations between Russia and America.
So, also on Thursday, Russia announced a breakthrough agreement on a Syrian ceasefire. What do you think of the timing of this, these sanctions now coming just after Russia is having success working with the Syrian government and with Turkey, in fact?
You can read that into it, but I suspect that it's more an accident of timing. This reaction was going to happen in the coming days anyway, because the Obama administration is in its dying last days. This was going to come out about this time anyway. There's no doubt, though, that the U.S. administration has its nose out of joint because of the progress that Russia and Turkey have been able to make.
Now, some of these sanctions can be seen as symbolic, like against the intelligence services and what have you. But what impact will these new measures have, given that there will be even a change of team in the White House in just a little more than 20 days?
I think we can expect to see a tit-for-tat reaction from Moscow. That would be the diplomatic norm. But, you know, these mass expulsions have been fairly common over the years. Diplomacy goes on, and most importantly of all, the countdown has begun to the taking of office of the new administration, when, with a bit of luck, it will be all change.
All right, Peter Ford, a former British diplomat. Interesting to hear your thoughts. Thanks for being with us here on RT International. All right, now, news just coming in right now. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has issued a statement on the new anti-Russian sanctions. He called on the United States to move on and also announced that he will meet with intelligence chiefs.